I'm Mike.
I'm Austin.
We are the Test Drivers.
And we put tech through its paces.
And today, I want to talk to you, Austin, about some of the technology that we have in our homes. I did realize when I was thinking of what I wanted to talk about this episode, and I thought, like, we are surrounded by this technology that we have in our living rooms, in our kitchens. And when I think about stuff that we test, like, these are products that we've decided to live with for long periods of time. So that's something that I want to cover later on in today's episode. But I have some news headlines that we should go over first. The first is, we're getting towards conference season. I feel like all the conferences are getting announced, this is kind of the time of year under normal circumstances when, like March into April, when we find out about, Apple's conference, Google's conference, all the big companies. WWDC 2021 has been announced for June 7 to 11. It's going to be all virtual again, as we would expect. But, Apple did a great job last year with WWDC.
Absolutely.
And it was one of the first events to go virtual, right? Because Google canceled I/O completely, which made sense for where they were because they were earlier. I think Google I/O was like a couple of weeks earlier. And they canceled it in like very early March when it just, no one really knew what was going, like it was just, everything was going mad. So they were just like, all right, we're just going to cancel it. And then I remember there was a few weeks where everyone, like Apple hadn't said anything. And it was kind of like, surely they're not doing this. Like, what's going on? And obviously they were spending a couple of weeks like confirming, because at that point in like early March of 2020, we didn't really know what was happening. We didn't know what was going to happen. So they were like collecting themselves and worked out this plan for like just a really excellent WWDC event. So they're doing it again. I expect it to kind of be bigger and better, like they should have learned from everything last year. I expect maybe more developer outreach, more like one-on-one developer sessions, that kind of stuff. But I'm super pumped for the video event anyway.
And I think it's hard to understate how good that Apple event team is and how good their video team is, right? Because you think about something the scale of a WWDC or an I/O. And I'm sure you actually have a lot more experience with this, but like I've had some experience kind of behind the scenes on watching as these events are put together and stuff. It is months and months and months of work. It's not like in March, you completely rip up your playbook and restart. That's a normal thing, right? In March, if you're 3 months out from an event, you're like deep crunch time. You're putting assets together. You're really kind of getting things sort of fine-tuned. The fact that they were able to do that last year and have it to be so successful and so interesting, literally in the middle of the pandemic, is crazy to me. And I have very high expectations for what they're actually able to do with more than a few months of, oh my God, frantic, please, we have to put an event together kind of prep work.
Yeah, because their events in the fall of last year, the production values were just bananas. Like when they built that entire house set and stuff. And so like I expect, that WWDC it's going to look great. And I also wonder, because the thing about WWDC is it's not just the keynote, it's also the sessions that they produce. And last year they produced all of these sessions and, they were really they were working on skeleton crews because nobody knew how to film anything, right? But this WWDC, I expect a lot of Apple's engineers will be fully vaccinated. So
sure,
I'm sure that the content itself could look very different to what we've seen in the past. I don't expect that they will have any media at the event.
No way.
I think it might be the last event Apple will do this year where they don't have any media.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about this before the show, but the way that this year is shaping up and how quickly things are changing. If you would have asked me, 2 or 3 months ago, I'm like, oh, there's no way any in-person events are happening in 2021. Are you crazy? But now at this point, especially for a company like Apple, right, who, sure, you have the splashy keynote and you have, the headlines and everything, But there's a certain element of not being able to have that in-person experience of, people touching that new iPhone, touching that new iMac, touching this new Apple AR glass, whatever the case is.
Well, that's the big thing, right? Like that headset, like I read a report about this, that apparently they don't want to launch their AR VR headset product until they can have people there to try it on, which makes so much sense for a product like that, right? They need people like you to make YouTube videos saying, I've tried it, it's mind-blowing, right? Rather than just reacting to what Apple's showing you. Like that this is the kind of thing where they want to put these things on people's actual faces, hopefully very nicely sanitized, and like get that. Even if they make it very restricted, very small, but it makes a lot of sense, I think, for an event like that to occur. So, I expect that will happen. And honestly, the September iPhone event, I could very much imagine a smaller US-based press contingent it being at that event. That seems very, 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 very likely to me at this point. Like if we're looking at September, October, I don't see that being a problem personally.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be really interesting to see because we also have E3 coming, although...
Yep, straight on the back of it. This is old school, man. I remember back in the day, like when I was first going to WWDC, it's like E3 would like just overlap or happen just immediately afterwards. But yeah, so WWDC runs June 7 to 11, E3 12 to 15. It's like straight away.
The thing with E3, though, is that, like WWDC, a completely virtual event, although last year, E3 just didn't happen, right?
I remember E3, they made the wrong decision. They held on for too long.
Yes. Yep.
Like they left it too late. They didn't give themselves enough time to do anything. And plus, they had the rug pulled out from under them anyway because there were all these other events. And they have for years. I mean, people were saying last year that like that cancellation is the death of E3 because so many companies work on their own thing, and or like side events that are happening at the same time. Like Sony get the theater down the road, right? And it's just not even a part of E3, but they're just taking advantage of everybody being in that place,
right?
But it's going to be all virtual. And according to the press release, it's going to feature content from Nintendo, Xbox, Capcom, Konami, Ubisoft, Take-Two, and more. I was very intrigued to see Nintendo and Microsoft in this list because, Nintendo's done the Treehouse stuff at E3 for years, but they do their own direct, so maybe it's going to be something like that. And I would assume maybe Xbox will be the same. Like, none of these companies need E3 to put on a video presentation for them. So I expect that they're kind of just like, I don't know, throwing E3 a bit of a bone, really, and just like, all right, we're going to do our own events during that period of time, but then we'll also have some content that we'll be putting through your platforms.
I think it's one of those things where E3 is such a long tradition, right? And it's such a well-timed event where, you announce your stuff at E3 or you show off the stuff that you had previously announced, in that summer time frame. And that 3-4 months later is when things really start to ship. Like, it's a good time to talk about a lot of this stuff. And especially after the last year where, yes, there was very much a trend away from E3, right? And yeah, we absolutely did a video on talking about, is this the end of E3 last year when it was canceled, right? Because E3 had been on this kind of like sort of downslope over the last few years. And like you said, Sony and other people were either removing themselves from the conference or kind of splitting off and doing their own thing. I do kind of feel like, though, that the last year has been a little bit of a reset button on that. I wouldn't be surprised if after all the turmoil and the craziness of the last, 12, 18 months or whatever, maybe something like E3 has a little bit more of like a focused future where it's not just like, they're trying to keep the doors open and they're opening to random fans and just trying to do anything and everything they can. But there's a little bit more of an incentive for companies like Nintendo and Xbox and all of these various different developers to have like, okay, you know what, we're going to say that this is at least the one time of year where we want to try to gather everyone around. It might be smaller than it was in the past. Certainly this year it is all digital, which is probably going to really mean that it's just like everyone's coordinating their launches on the same days, but like there's not really any, I don't know if you're going to be able to watch this at E3.com or likely it's going to be streaming and whatnot, but it does kind of feel to me like this is a little bit of a consolidation of the fragmented E3 experience into something where, look, this is going to be the week where you're going to find out about all the new games, PS5 exclusives, Xbox exclusives. I mean, Sony's not technically there, but they're going to be watching. They're going to have something around this time so they don't completely get sort of washed out of that news cycle.
Talking about Xbox, did you see that Grand Theft Auto 5 is coming back to Game Pass?
And xCloud.
Yeah. That's
it's
wild.
It's good, man.
The game that will never die.
Dude, it is crazy to me. So we actually have not seen the Xbox Series X and PS5 edition of GTA 5 that was announced last year, I believe.
Yep.
But it is insane to me that game originally came out on Xbox 360 and PS3 at the very end of that life cycle, but that was what, 2013? And it is still going and still being developed.
I mean, this game will still be played, I expect of us somewhat, well, I don't think will be replaced before it hits 10 years old.
I totally agree.
Right? There's not going to be, I don't imagine a GTA 6 appearing in 2023, because we've heard nothing about one.
I mean, there's always basic rumors. I'm sure, in 2014, there was a small little contingent inside Rockstar that, okay, let's think about GTA 6 or whatever. But, I mean, it's a game that makes them so much money. It's a game that they have continuously updated. It's not like 2013's version of GTA 5 is just what we all play today, right? It has been so constantly evolved. But it is wild to me to think of how many ways GTA 5 has been everywhere. I mean, wasn't it free on the Epic Store? Was that a year or so ago?
I think so.
It's just, it spreads and spreads and spreads, which it's a great game. And honestly, I actually am really ready to replay it. I have never played through the main story of GTA 5 since I first tried it on the Xbox 360 back in 2013. I've never replayed it.
So I did it when it originally came out, and then I played it when it came out on PS4.
I've played a little bit, but I never played through the story, right? I played through the whole story, that first, week or two on the 360, which, of course, GTA 5, if everyone remembers, was a incredible game that was able to run on that 360 and PS3, right? Absolutely incredible that they were able to get that entire experience down to those consoles. But, I mean, that game ran at 20 FPS. It looked great, but man, it was not a well-performing game. It was one of those they were absolutely squeaking everything out of it. I'm pretty sure that was the game that on 360 you had to install one of the discs, and the second disc was there, and it was literally reading from the hard drive and the DVD at the same time. That
sounds about right.
It's crazy that game from all those years ago is now finally getting its PS5 patch. I would have loved to talk to 2013 Austin and go, hey, new PS3 game? Yeah, you're going to be playing that on the PS5 with the remastered edition
of console. It's going to just continue living on. Do you have any feelings about LG being done with smartphones?
Sadness.
Yeah, I mean, it is a shame, really, because they've been doing such wild stuff like the Wing.
Yeah.
And that's just gone now.
So this was something that had been rumored for a while, honestly. Yeah. I mean, even back at E3 at CES, or actually, I guess the virtual CES technically, when they had talked about that rollable, right, where they were pre-announcing it, it had a little bit of an air of that last gasp of hey, we're coming out with stuff, don't count us out. But there were so many rumors
because they've been talking for a while about wanting to make their smartphone division profitable. That's been the saber they've been rattling for a while, and basically it seems to have been decided that there's just no way for them to do it, which makes me kind of wonder about a bigger question. Is it even possible for a company to do what LG wanted to do now? Is OnePlus the kind of exception to the rule of being able to rise up and make a profitable business, assuming that OnePlus is a profitable business in smartphones? Can you come out and try and attack Samsung? Can people actually do that?
Sure. I will say I have a lot of mixed feelings on this, right? So I was pretty close with a lot of the people on the LG side. We did a lot of stuff. I mean, I helped do some of the launch stuff for the Wing. I really liked those guys, and they had done a lot of good stuff over the years. In talking with some of them and some of the other sort of people in the tech space, I very much get the impression that LG smartphones was a little bit sort of overwhelmed by the weight of being such a big company and trying to sort of compete in such a broad number of spaces, right? So LG on the surface has a lot, or I guess had a lot of the same advantages that Samsung did, right? A lot of that vertical integration where you've got LG Display making the panels, you've got a lot of different divisions of LG, which it's easy to kind of forget on the outside, but like LG isn't really just a single company, right? I mean, like, LG Display makes TV or makes panels and they sell it to LG TV department, who then actually puts those panels into TVs. Like, it's like a bunch of companies that are kind of loosely attached with the LG name, but they're different, essentially, companies on the inside, right? And I think there were certainly some dysfunction, perhaps, especially when you look sort of kind of with the benefit of hindsight at how competitive some of the LG phones were, right? The last year or so, they really were trying to put out some very unique and interesting devices, but that was on the tail of years of decent, okay, reasonable phones. But like they had really sort of the last 4 or 5 years had really kind of defined themselves by the niche stuff, right? They were trying to do, push the cameras forward, which was good, but they weren't ever like amazing, blow your mind kind of cameras. They would push stuff like, keeping the headphone jack and, having the quad DAC on it. And they had these sort of like niche features, but similar to, I think, where Sony is right now, it's a smartphone division of a very large company. It kind of buckles under the weight because if you look at it from, okay, look, I'm, the head of LG. I look at, all of the various different divisions. I'm spending how many billions of dollars on smartphones to get, 1% market share? Like, that's just not sustainable. Whereas if you're a smaller company, if you're punching up, you have that, potential growth. You're not limited by, I got to use that LG panel on my smartphone, which might not be the best. Or, like, you have that less sort of unencumbered experience. I do think there's potential for smaller companies to succeed in a way that LG kind of feel like it sort of was crushed under the weight of the size of the company that was attached to.
I think LG have had, that is a very good point, by the way. And I think LG have had this thing attached to them for years. Like, I feel like every phone I can imagine or remember LG bringing out in the last, I don't know how many, maybe 5-10 years, it's always kind of been this, but why would you buy that one? Like, whether they were making the stuff that was like samey, like regular, and then it's like, why would I buy that over all these other things? And also kind of when they were doing things like the Wing, like, why would I buy that one? Like, it's fun and weird, but like, do I want that? I think that might have been the problem. And I honestly think for them, when it comes down to the like regular phones, like the more regular smartphones that they used to make, it's probably just a branding issue.
Oh, yeah. When you look at OnePlus, right?
Yep.
One of the very smart things that they did as a company was start out with the flagship killer brand and that very heavy focus on the hardcore Android community, right? Like, it was cool, right? Like, if you were in 2014, 2015, you had a OnePlus, you were cool because it was one of those things where if you knew, you knew. It wasn't something that you could walk down to your carrier store and get. You had to order online. You had seen it from an MKBHD video. Like, there was a real sort of groundswell of building out this new brand. And of course, there were the ties to the larger overall conglomerate. And, obviously they were able to save a lot of money and be able to be part of something where they weren't literally building everything themselves when it comes to design and whatnot. But like, it was one of those things where they had that sort of niche that they started out with and they could grow it. Whereas LG was kind of like, for a little while, I mean, they were very competitive with Samsung, right? Maybe they were never, absolutely destroying Samsung, or whatever. But like, there were several years there where, you would go buy a G3 or a G4 and it was similar. I mean, I don't know if you remember when they did like the G Flex, when Samsung started curving their displays, LG were right there curving them in the other direction, which was ultimately probably the wrong direction. But there were things that they could do. But I agree. I think at the end, they had kind of fallen themselves into like, well, the reason to buy an LG phone is because we have this niche feature of the headphone jack or whatever the case is. But there was never an overriding thing in a way that Samsung could do because Samsung just had muscled their way through to have that dominant market position. They had not only a even more vertically integrated stack where they were making the chips and the RAM and the SSD. Like they were making almost all the components of the phone in-house. But also they were so big and they had such huge sort of market pull that there's only one Samsung, right? You can't just replicate another Samsung and be worldwide. And that's really what LG needed to do. If they couldn't be Samsung, that smartphone business was ultimately never going to be big enough to sustain itself when you have, how many ever billions of dollars are being spent on every other element of the company. Why were they going to be wasting and ultimately losing money on the smartphone space? It's sad, man. It's sad because they had a lot of great phones. They had a lot of potential. Obviously, so many people had LG phones as their first device or, used, even like you look back to like a lot of like the Nexuses and stuff. Like LG had such a huge part to play in, the last decade, even longer of phones. It's sad to see them go, right? It's never a good thing where we're not going to have those weird, quirky designs that, maybe weren't for everyone, but they were certainly for some people. And now that we've lost that, I do feel like the smartphone space is a little bit, worse off because of it. It's a weird one, man. It's a weird one.
I think one of the sadder parts of it that I actually saw, I think I saw some suggestions or rumors that LG was trying to sell off the division and couldn't find a buyer.
Which makes sense. I mean, it's tough.
I mean, who's going to want it? But still, there's still, I don't know, there's something about that that's just a little bit sad to me. But who would you sell it to? Like, unless LG had a bunch of intellectual property that was really valuable, I mean, everyone just looks at what happened to Motorola with Google.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, it's hard to detangle something like that because you know that if LG were selling the smartphone division, they're not going to sell the LG brand, right? You're going to get like the assets, you're going to get the developers. There's some stuff there, but it's not like anything that is completely and totally unique. And, when you look at something like Motorola, you were able to purchase that brand, right? Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, Google sold it to Lenovo, right? So they're still selling phones under the Motorola brand. Like, there was a whole sort of ecosystem there. If LG are trying to just sell off their smartphone division, short of some like Google maybe, right? If Google was really trying to build their thing out and they didn't already
they wanted those engineers, they wanted the tech or whatever, but
but
I don't think they need that now.
The amount of buyers for something like that is really limited, especially considering that the various strings attached and all the overhead. It's just sad, man. I mean, look, everything has its expiration date. You got to look on the positive side of look at all the great things that happen, but it's a weird space. I don't think this is the last of the big companies that are going to kind of consolidate down, right? I think the smartphone space was such a huge growth area for so many years, and still obviously is very, very popular. But I think we're going to see more of this consolidation, right? Where it's like, you're not going to have 25 companies who are selling, reasonable smartphones. You're going to have 4, maybe 5, right? There's going to be the OnePlus and the Apple and the Samsung, and there's going to be a handful of companies, but I don't think we're going to see that, massive amount because there's no more like green pastures to build smartphones, right? I mean, pretty much anyone who wants to make a smartphone is making a smartphone right now. There's not the scale of things. It just makes it prohibitively expensive to try to actually get into that game today.
This episode is brought to you by Technology Untangled. I've said this so many times. I love finding new podcasts. You love finding new podcasts too, right? Well, I have a great one for you. It's hosted by Michael Bird. Technology Untangled is a show that deciphers tech's rapid evolutions with one simple question in mind. What's really going to shape our future and what's going to end up in the bargain bin alongside floppy disks? Past guests on the show include people from Google and Sainsbury's, Aston Martin, Red Bull Racing, which is obviously a big thing for me in Austin, Goonhilly Earth Station, the New York Times, Nokia, and many more. And they give you real insight, real deep dives into really interesting parts of technology, like 5G. So why does it work? Who does it work for? What does it actually do? What does 5G mean for you? You can find out on Technology Untangled. They also talk about how supercomputers are helping us fight against COVID by sifting through billions of molecules to look for drugs to repurpose, along with AI and the future of jobs, and episodes on energy, innovation, and mission to Mars. You're spoiled for choice. I checked out the supercomputers episode, which I really was very fascinated by because I think this is a phrase that I know, but I don't really know what we're using them for today. Like, our computers are so powerful. Why do we still need supercomputers? And so it explains what makes them so powerful, why these advantages still exist, and how AI is, of course, only accelerating it. So this episode really breaks down what it is that actually makes a supercomputer super. So you can search for Technology Untangled anywhere that you listen to podcasts, and we'll include a link in the show notes as well. Our thanks to Technology Untangled for their support of this show and Relay FM. So, talking about F1 last time as well. Obviously, we spoke about Drive to Survive. I'm sure many of our listeners now watch Drive to Survive if they haven't already. There has also since been the opening race of the season in Bahrain. Let's take another quick diversion and talk about Formula One again.
Look. We're the test drivers again.
This is the driving part.
We got good feedback. I will say we got good feedback on the F1 stuff last episode. Yep. I know we had talked about it we want to kind of do it. Maybe we'll put it at the end of the episode. But I feel like a lot of people enjoyed it. So look, we're going to take a quick diversion. I don't think we're going to do a race by race breakdown of the whole year. But,
we'll
Mike
dip
and I
in
want
and
to talk
out.
about this.
We're going to dip in and out. So how did you find the first race?
Oh, brilliant.
Super
One of the
good,
best
right?
races. Yeah, it was. So, okay, for listeners who have not maybe watched F1 for long periods of time, or maybe haven't even ever watched it much at all, right? You maybe just seen a little bit of Drive to Survive, especially the first season of Drive to Survive. One of the things that really made it so interesting was it made it so much more interesting because F1 is a sport that is not inherently the most competitive in the world, right? I mean, there's a very clear hierarchy of, there's a couple of teams who can win a race, right? There are, a handful of drivers. Like most years, every single race is won by 2-3 people. Like it's not like anyone can have a shot. And, there's very clear hierarchies of if you have a slow car, you will, short of everyone else crashing in, some 1 in a million sort of circumstance, you're never going to win that race, right? Which is part of the reason why, last year when Gasly won was like an unbelievable, like, oh my God kind of moment. It's not just like, oh, this dude won his first race. Congratulations. Like, I mean, winning a Formula One Grand Prix is an incredibly prestigious thing that very, very few people ever get the opportunity to do.
Yeah, if you win one in your career, you go down in history for having won one.
Absolutely.
Right, like you're remembered. You're in the history books.
And it's one of the things where the shakeups in the competitive order are very rare. Right. So for context, Mercedes have won the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships 7 years in a row, which, to be fair, I think is actually the longest streak of dominance. I know Ferrari had 6 or 7 back in the early 2000s. But regardless, incredibly rare to have this kind of thing. And it's like there's very few shakeups, right, when you can win 7 things in a row. But this year, with one race down, right, so obviously sort of everyone take it with a grain of salt.
We're early.
There seem to be some shakeups, right?
Mm-hmm.
Red Bull are faster, at least at the moment, the Mercedes. And that has not happened in a very, very long time.
Yeah. I mean, so what ended up happening was Lewis won the race, so for Mercedes, and Max Verstappen came in second, which was not what a lot of people thought was going to happen going into the race weekend. Everybody was, except me, thinking Max was going to win. I will say my prediction was that Max wasn't going to finish. Like, I thought he was going to have some kind of disaster, which for a while it looked like might have been possible because he was complaining about something on the car. But, so, and really, I think what ended up winning out the day was just strategy and experience on the side of Mercedes.
Limits.
And but the track limits thing is like, doesn't really hold much water for me. It's like this is one of those things that comes up a lot in Formula One. Everybody takes advantage of the rules,
which is the way it's always been.
If there's a gray area in the rules, though, that will be exploited. Similarly to if you can protest something, you will, right? Like the rules are as much of a player in Formula One as anything else, right? And the way that the teams work within and on the fringes of the rules. Maybe I'm just a biased Lewis Hamilton fan, but whatever.
Wow. I see how it is.
I'm a big fan of Lewis, and so like I feel like a lot of the people complaining about the track limits thing aren't. Is the way that I take that from the criticism of the race. But nevertheless, like Lewis won, but really only just, right? Like
only barely.
It was down to the final lap, and I can't recall a race last season where that occurred. Maybe once, but it wasn't between the top teams. It was on one of the weekends where some disasters occurred, right? And so it was all shaken up. But like, down to the last few corners, it was not known who was going to win that race. And so I think that there is a lot of intrigue and excitement in people as to whether that's going to be a consistent thing we're going to see every week now.
Because it's so different to not have Mercedes be clearly the fastest and everyone else be chasing them, right? And the last few years, Mercedes only loses when they have, a failure or or someone actually puts the wrong set of tires on.
Yep. There's a big screw up on Mercedes' part, not that some other team has gotten a advantage on them as such.
Exactly. But this year, so far through preseason testing and the first race, which again, it's early, Red Bull seems to be the comfortably faster car, and it really was down to strategy and Lewis's sheer driving ability that they were able to squeak out the win here. I think we're in store for a very, very good season. So again, just floating it out there. If any of the test drivers are listening, you're thinking about F1, you maybe watched a little bit of Drive to Survive or something. This season is shaping up. It has all the elements of what could be one of the best F1 seasons in years. We'll have to wait and see. Who knows? Maybe Max just wins the next 15 races in a row and it's boring again. But this is not something that happens often, right? This is something
I don't think it's going to
happen. Okay. So we talked about this before, right? We're going to make some predictions on the record, right? After watching the very first race. So everyone in the audience can hold us to this or not. Up to you. But
we're
gonna make some bold predictions. Hopefully neither of us have to eat an Xbox or whatever we were talking about last year.
Eat a tire.
No.
All right, so let's actually start with that. Who do you think's gonna win the season as driver and constructor?
I think Mercedes are gonna win again. But I don't think it's gonna be close.
I don't think it's going to be a foregone conclusion 3/4 of the way through the season, right?
Yes. If I were going to make a big prediction, right, I think Mercedes will win, but I think Max and Red Bull will take them to the last couple of races to really decide, right? I don't think it's going to be one of those things where, 5 races before it's a foregone conclusion and, Lewis takes off 3 races and he still wins. I think it's going to be much closer. I think we're going to see a much closer, kind of win count versus, with, Max. And I feel like Checo will also win a race this year. I think is a not a wild sort of prediction. But yeah, I still think the power of that Mercedes team is there, but I will be very happy to be proved wrong. And if we're, talking about this in 8 months, whenever the season's over, and I am wrong or we're wrong about this prediction, I won't be massively surprised because Red Bull do look incredibly quick right now.
Yeah, I was wondering, what would it take for Lewis to win the season? Is there any possibility Red Bull could win constructors? Because it will depend on Valtteri just having an uncharacteristically bad season and Checo really pulling it out. And it looked like, what did he finish? 5th, I think?
Which is dead last? Yeah.
Right. Well, irrespective of even the fact that he went from dead last, which is just incredibly impressive. Just looking at the performance of Red Bull's second drivers of the last 2 years, that is a vastly superior performance to those guys in that seat. That's Gasly and Albon, both great drivers when they weren't in the Red Bull car.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that there's a thing there. And I think it needs somebody who's a lot more sure of themselves, a bit more experience, which it seems like Checo, which we know Checo has. And I'm wondering how that's going to translate, because if he can get some podiums in, and maybe as you want to predict a win or two, Red Bull could be much closer to the constructors even than Max would be to Lewis. There's a possibility of that, right?
I agree. Yeah. So I guess prediction number 1 for me, Mercedes win, but Red Bull make it very, very close.
Okay. I'm going for Lewis and Mercedes. I think what we saw between preseason testing and the race was a vastly improved car from Mercedes.
Yeah.
I think that it is very much in the realm of possibility that the improvements will just continue. And so they will be able to hold Red Bull off. I think that the fact that they've not made a huge jump on them in the beginning shows that it's not going to be like the last season or two. Because I think, you can only really be so incredibly dominant if you're dominant from day one. I don't think you can find that dominance, like just because there, as you say, it is so much of the marriage between the car and the driver, and it seems like the benefits that Mercedes have made have been outweighed by the benefits that Red Bull has made in that same time period. So I think that they will do it, but it won't be as comfortable as previous years, especially last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we do have some more detailed predictions. I think you've given away a couple of yours, but what are your? We're going to make 3 predictions now for the rest of the season. What are yours?
Okay, so Lewis and Mercedes win. Like I said, Red Bull comes really close. I think Checo will win at least one race for Red Bull. And I think that there's going to be, by the end of the season, some major shakeup at Haas, right? Whether it is Mazepin gets fired and they lose funding, whether it's that they sell the team, whether it's the team goes under, that team is a powder keg, especially, I mean, it's hard not to have this opinion, especially after watching Drive to Survive, but like, they're in bad shape. They're basically running their 2019 car at this point because they barely developed it for last year. And then they really aren't developing it for this year. They've gone from like being a decent midfield team to like, they're going to be like a second behind Williams every week, right? I mean, they're going to be hanging off the back.
I think that they're going to be dead last this year.
Absolutely.
Which will be great for Williams. Finally,
But I feel like there's going to be some major shakeup, whether it's, like a particular driver maybe getting not making it to the end of the season, or just the team imploding or something, or being purchased, right? There have been rumors about some potential, especially now there's the cost cap in place, of manufacturers or companies wanting to get into F1. And I guarantee you Haas are running right now mostly on the strength of the fact that they owned that, those 2 slots on the grid. And, that's not something that is, low value, right? So if a manufacturer wants to get into F1, if anyone wants to try to get into F1, it seems like it's not a crazy proposition to just purchase Haas, buy them out, whatever the case is, and take over their grid slots. So those are my 3 predictions. I think when we come back and we talk about this at the end of 2021, I feel relatively confident that my predictions are good. I'm feeling good. Where are you at right now?
Well, I have a couple of questions on your predictions. One, a comment that I'll make is like the cost cap, which is like basically there's going to be a fixed budget for that you can't exceed from 2022 in F1, which has not been the case before. I think that could just change the sport in a lot of ways. Like we could see, as you say, a company buying in because they know it's only going to cost them this amount of money to get in, right? But also I could imagine, I don't know what the possibility would be, but like additional teams like being added.
Technically, yeah.
Right, it could happen. As far as I'm aware, like there isn't like a fixed amount of teams.
There is, but it's higher than there are right now. It's like 14 or 15. There's potential for more.
Because I just know that when I was a kid, there used to be more than do we have 11 or 10 teams right now, right?
Yeah.
And I knew that there used to be more. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like if a company might have been eyeing it for a while and like, okay, so now we know how much this is going to cost us. Let's give it a shot, right?
Well, I mean, it's easy to forget that none of the teams are profitable and have not been profitable. Even Mercedes, the championship winners back to back, they still lose money. Mind you, they've gotten to the point where they lose a very small amount of money. And obviously the marketing benefits are enormous for their parent company, Mercedes. But even then, these companies were not profitable. Ferrari, I mean, look, Ferrari has, spent, I don't know, 400 or 500 million. I mean, the amounts of cash that these teams have previously spent is crazy, but with this cost cap, it brings it much more in line with a lot of other sports that actually have, there's 160, 170 million pounds. There's some hard limit where every team cannot spend over that. And it's one of those things where a lot of the smaller teams were pretty much already at that budget, right? So it's no longer this huge gap where Mercedes can just outspend and have 5 times the staff of the Williamses, the Haas's of the world. So I think it's a good thing. I agree. I think that has a lot of potential to shake things up and make an F1 an actually sustainable sport where it's not just, I want to have a race team and I'm going to burn a giant fortune every year to make sure that it stays running.
And your Perez winning a race, this isn't part of your prediction, but I just want to know your thinking. Do you think that Perez wins a regular race, or do you think something happens and Perez wins the race?
I think he will win a race with a little bit of luck. I don't think it will be a straight, he'll sweep the weekend and everything. I think he was going to be up there in contention the whole year. Mm-hmm. And all it takes is someone to slip.
He'll get some podiums. I'm confident of that. Right.
Yeah, same.
But like, imagine like, Valtteri spins out or something, right? And, like Perez can get in or something, mm-hmm. Maybe he gets a bit of a showing. All right. So my predictions, George Russell leaves Williams for another team.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Right. Valtteri leaves Mercedes.
I see where this is going. Okay.
I'm not tying the dots here.
Okay. Sure.
Aston to get on the podium twice in the season.
Ooh.
That final one is purely me wanting it to happen.
I mean, that livery, that green, man, I feel you on that. It's a great looking car.
I've got just a great sense of British pride for that team, man. I can't let it go. Even though none of the component pieces are British, right? You've got a German and Canadian driver owned by a Canadian billionaire, but it's Aston Martin, man.
They've got the Union Jack on there somewhere.
I know. It's also the entire color, right? It's like a new interpretation of British racing green. Like I love it. Like I really love it. And I want them to do well. Like, because I had a lot of love for Racing Point. I kind of like their can-do attitude as a team. They're like,
who of course have rebranded as Aston Martin this year. Same team, different livery, different brand. Since Lawrence Stroll, the owner of the company, also owns Aston Martin, so just kind of makes sense to sort of.
You just smushed them all together. Which you're saying earlier about like if other maybe car manufacturers want to get into it. I think Aston Martin is the showing that you might want to do that if you're a car company, right?
Absolutely.
Lawrence Stroll thought it was a good idea to marry those two things together. And so I think it would make sense, and that there is something. So, I mean, Renault do it as well, right? Like there are other car companies that might want to get into this as a way to market their consumer vehicles.
Especially now that it doesn't cost you $500 million a year to run.
Yeah, you can fix it, and and you can say like, all right, we think we'll be able to project this amount of market benefit for us, and then also we can sell sponsorships.
So I will say I agree with 2 of your 3 predictions. I think George will not finish this season with a continuation of Williams. I think that's a pretty safe bet. And I think Valtteri, it's probably about time for him to really spend this year planning his next move, right? Mm-hmm. I think makes a lot of sense for George to get the call up to Mercedes, especially how he performed last year.
That's the dots that I'm not tying, right? Is that I think Valtteri might not have the option because they will bring George Russell into Mercedes.
I think that's a safe bet, right? I think that's a safe bet. George gets the call up to Mercedes for next year alongside Lewis. If Lewis continues, which I do think he will, that seems safe. Aston, though, I'm not.
That one
super
is
confident
pure
in that one.
I want, right? Like I am projecting my want into a prediction.
Mm-hmm.
Like I will say as well, after the first race, the teams that I have a real soft spot for this year are Aston and AlphaTauri.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, I loved Pierre's story last year, and Yuki Tsunoda, that's it. I keep calling him Sonda. I keep getting his name and Honda mixed up. Tsunoda. He's new, right? Like, benefit of the doubt. I've only really known of this guy for like 3 weeks. Yuki Tsunoda,
oh my God.
He's so charming. Like, I loved all of the interviews that I saw with him. And also, he is a beast in the car.
Absolutely. Some of those dive bombs that he made on that first race, when he came from like a mile back and past Alonso, I was like, are you kidding me right now? And he made it look so effortless.
Did you see the interview where he was saying like he was just like freaking out as he did that because Alonso was his dad's favorite driver? So Alonso's been a bit of like a role model, like a hero figure for him as he was growing up, and he got to pass him on his first Grand Prix
in a spectacular fashion. I mean, just that overtake was like, there was so many ways that he could have just crashed both cars there, right? He just absolutely just sent it. It was also great because Yuki is the first F1 driver born into the 2000s, right? So Yuki's only like 20 years old. So,
and it's great to have someone from Japan back on the grid. That's been a long time. And I think he ended up, he's now at the very small group, like comparatively, of people that have scored points on their first Grand Prix.
which is amazing, right? I mean, that AlphaTauri looks good this year.
Yeah.
But between Yuki and Pierre, I mean, they've got a very strong driver lineup. And I don't know, if I'm Checo, I'm probably looking a little bit over my shoulder now of like, well, we'll see how
many years
Yuki
have I
does.
got in this?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to want to get those podiums.
It's hard not to love Yuki though, man. I mean, look, I've been following for a little bit, and I'm just like, the dude is so he's not only is he so funny, but like, he's so like he's always kind of making fun of himself. He's I think by far the shortest driver on the grid too. So it's like there are so many great memes. Look, Yuki's gonna have a good year. I have a lot of confidence in that, and I am absolutely rooting for him. I don't know how far he'll be able to go in that AlphaTauri, but man, I'm so excited that F1's back. I'm so excited that we have what is shaping up to be an excellent season. And I hope that this enthusiasm is infectious to the audience. I don't know how much we should talk about F1. I guess actually, if you guys want to let us know, give us a little feedback. If you want us to maybe sprinkle a little update here or there. But just know that Mike and I are going to be talking about this before and after the show for all year long. So,
and look, feel free. Like, if you want to tell us, please don't do this anymore. Like, don't worry about that feedback. That we want to know it. Like, it's helpful to gauge it.
Yeah, absolutely. Twitter is your friend in at least this particular instance. I don't know about overall.
This episode of The Test Drivers is brought to you by Mint Mobile. After years of fine print contracts and paying too much money with big wireless providers, it's no wonder we're skeptical about new deals. So when you learn that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month, you might wonder, what's the catch? But once you learn about them and their service, it actually makes sense. There isn't a catch. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. By cutting out retail stores, there's no wild overhead costs to get passed down to you in the form of mystery fees. Instead, Mint passes just a sweet savings directly to you. For people looking for extra savings, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless service for just $15 a month. All of their plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your phone of any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with all your existing contacts, and you'll be able to switch and get that premium wireless service at just $15 a month. And if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee. Austin, can you tell the Test Drivers listeners just how fast it is to get set up on Mint Mobile?
It is incredibly seamless. You get the SIM card in the mail, pop it in your phone, and in a matter of just a few minutes, not only do you have your service up and running, but you're saving that money, right? It is such a no-brainer. Why do you need to spend all this extra cash on all the bells and whistles when guess what? You get all of the things you need with Mint Mobile, including that super fast 5G speed.
To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get that plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/testdrivers. That's mintmobile.com/testdrivers to cut your wireless bill to $15 a month. mintmobile.com/testdrivers. Our thanks to Mint Mobile for their support of this show and Relay FM. Let's talk about products, technology that we use at home, whether it's quote-unquote smart technology or not, because some of the home tech that we use, I mean, I'm thinking about maybe, well, you can kind of choose. So like you're looking at TVs, you can maybe run them as smart or not. But I wondered about what are the things that we've decided on to be in our lives on a daily basis, because this is stuff that we live with or have lived with for longer periods of time, sometimes than the smartphone that we use or whatever, right? Like a lot of this home tech, I think, at least for me, you probably agree, doesn't get upgraded with the same kind of frequency as some of the other stuff that we use. And I have a few different categories. So security, entertainment, smart assistants, and lighting. I think these are kind of the biggest quote unquote like home technology stuff that people tend to buy. What is your overall, because I know I think you recently moved, right? So I assume you've been thinking about this a little bit more than most. What's your current approach to kind of tech at home?
So it's changed a lot. So where my previous place, I had a lot of stuff in there, right? I had, Nest. It was mostly Google, right? So I had a lot of Google Assistants, Nest. It was pretty much sort of, I had the Hues and everything everywhere. And you know what? I actually was happy to not set that stuff up when I moved. I am living a much dumber life than I have in probably 6 or 7 years, and I don't hate it. Look, we'll talk about the devices, and there's still, of course, some smart devices in my house, but I felt like the advantages I was gaining out of some of the specifically like having like the Google Assistant and some of the light stuff in the house wasn't huge. And it always gave me this icky feeling. We've done we've done several videos on it in the past, but the amount of data that is being collected, the amount of recordings, like when you go back through and you listen to your random Alexa or Google recordings that are saved to your account, the random conversations that get picked up and
that's an upsetting thing to look through. What I like though about the Echoes is you do actually get to look. You know, like other companies, like Apple, you don't know what they are. They don't surface that to you. Of like, these were all of the times you accidentally triggered the phrase word, and then we heard you but realized this wasn't something that needed to be actioned on. Like we worked out that it was fake. Like a fake kind of thing, that maybe it was not said correctly. But like at least with the Echo, you can delete them too, right? Like, which is another thing.
And Google will allow you to do that as well. Yeah,
right, yeah. But Apple doesn't, and that really bugs me about the Siri stuff.
Yeah, which to be fair, I do think Siri does allow you to decouple that, right? So like, on my Google account, on my Amazon account, I'm looking through all of my recordings and stuff. I feel like the way that Apple allow you to set it up with the privacy stuff, where you can actually decouple that, so it's not like, someone at Apple grabs your Apple ID, pulls your recordings, like it's a little bit sort of separate. So they do a good job.
It's yes and no. So one of the reasons they did that is because they got caught out. That this stuff was getting sent to a company, a contracting company to be listened to. So they made it an opt-in. But there is some of it you cannot opt out from. You cannot. You can opt out from humans listening to these things, but I don't believe you can opt out of them being assessed by AI.
Ooh,
Siri but what you opt out of is human review, because that was the thing they got in trouble for.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot here. I guess going into it though, I live a dumber. My house is dumber than it was in the past, and I don't miss it. So
because there's a couple of things about smart home technology that are pitfalls you can fall into. Like one, it's a newer form of technology, so a lot of the stuff isn't completely fully formed yet.
Yeah.
And you are, in a lot of instances, replacing something that works flawlessly with something that doesn't work all the time, right? Like you're thinking about lighting or whatever. And I think a lot of people that listen to the show can probably sympathize with this. You are maybe the nerdier person in your household, and so you care about this stuff more than the other people that you're now subjecting to this type of technology at home. And that can be frustrating for the people that you live with, that now to turn the lights on, they can't just use the switch anymore. They have to ask for the lights to turn on. And there are benefits and disadvantages to that. Like sometimes people really dig it, sometimes they don't. And they're like, lighting changes in my house have been like, everybody's really cool with that. Like me and my wife like it. Like we like having the lights and can activate them with our voice. But it definitely hasn't been the case for everything, where it's been super smooth sailing and everyone's super happy about this piece of technology that I brought home. And that goes for me as well as everyone else, right? Like sometimes I'll change a thing and be like, this has made everything markedly worse. So those products don't stick around.
It's a tough space. It's a tough space. Yeah. So that was actually one of the big reasons why when we moved, we didn't really set up a lot of the other stuff. My wife, maybe Google listened to her 70% of the time. And it was very frustrating to like yell at Google 3 times to turn on the lights, whereas it worked perfectly for me every time. So there's certainly that. And I will say my setup right now is very fragmented. Like I was mostly on the Google ecosystem before. As we go through this list, I've got a bunch of randomness everywhere. Nothing works well. I have 10 apps on my phone. So even what I have now, it's not really an improvement either, right? It's one of those things where I feel like there's probably a consolidation pass on a lot of this stuff. But I guess we should start with the security side of things.
Yeah, because I think security is actually a good one, because the home security space is otherwise really expensive and difficult if you're going with one of the more established companies. And so companies like Ring and Nest give, I think, more options to the average consumer than had previously been available in this category.
Yeah. And that's actually what I've switched back over to. Actually, mostly due to insurance reasons. But I do have one of those like old school full security systems at the house, at the office, all that kind of stuff, which is fine. And I know a lot of the companies have brought out, apps and everything. A lot of it's not very good. Like I have some of my stuff is run through literally like a DVR in my closet, which has this janky app to connect.
Oh my God, no.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I have an actual box in my closet with hard drives and everything in it. It's not great, right? Look, I again, like I said, not super happy with where it's at right now. I do also have
there could be like a privacy angle with that though, which is better, but
no. It's just bad. It's just It doesn't work well and it's expensive. But yeah, something I want to deal with later. I do also have a Ring doorbell camera though, which actually I've been pretty happy with. It's one of those things where due to my wiring, I didn't want to have to hook up like a transformer or whatever to make it work. So I've just got the one. It's running on battery. Happy with that. It works well. I don't like the fact that that's the only Ring product I have, which means that I have, again, yet another app to check notifications for and whatnot. But that actually is something that works pretty well for me.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth just mentioning right up top that there is this prospect of all of these companies talking together. They like all signed this agreement, but nothing has ever come from it since. It's called like Connected Home over IP, where like Amazon and Apple and Google all signed it with the idea being that all of these products would talk together. But that was announced and then nobody's ever said anything since. I mean, like this might be just one of those things got put on the back burner because of COVID, right? Like I could imagine that, right? Like, yeah. But I really would like to see more on that. So I have kind of two setups. I have a home setup and I have my out of home studio. And at home, we've been using a product for years called Canary.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's just a little camera, and it's got a speaker in it, and an alarm and stuff, and some temperature sensors and stuff. Like, I've actually been thinking about wanting to move away from Canary for a bit, because they have never really added to their product line. And that's just seemed weird to me. Like, all of their competitors update the products, like here's the product number 2 with better this, better that. And Canary have never done any of that. So I wonder, are they long for this world? Like I'm not sure, But we pay a subscription to them. A lot of these apps you can pay subscriptions to, or you get like free tiers or whatever. But for something like this, like I pay the subscription, so we get the video recording saved and stuff. And I do like that there are options now that I know some friends use, that like you can do this stuff with HomeKit or whatever, like and just get these cameras, and then it's all saved, like better encrypted and stuff, if you trust maybe Apple more than company X or whatever. But and then at the studio we have the full Ring security set that they have, like, so it has door and window sensors, motion sensors, a full-on alarm, an alarm panel, and all that kind of stuff. Like, and that's really good for that space. So the doors both have their sensors on them. The window has its sensor on it. It can trip it and that kind of stuff. And so, like, we've got a couple of cameras in there as well. So that was really good, because I was looking for a full system, and I was actually surprised at how, I thought, I wanted to look. I think I'd look at Nest and Ring. And I remember at the time, like the options that I could get from Nest was nowhere near as complete as the options that I could get from Ring.
And that is actually my old setup, was the Nest's, was it Nest Protect?
Protect.
It was fine, but it was very expensive. And in fact, it's actually since been discontinued. I think Google now pushes you to sign up for like ADT or something, like one of the more like established companies. Yeah, it was fine, and it had some of those things, but yeah, I agree. It was one of those things where I wanted to give it a try, and it worked okay. But there's always this kind of disconnect between these alarm systems that, give you a notification on your phone versus actually call the police, or, actually has someone, monitoring it. So you certainly get different service tiers when it comes to the security systems. It doesn't seem like the full-on like alarm sort of ecosystem is anywhere near as established as, the cameras and the little bit more lightweight devices in the security space.
I think Nest Protect is their smoke alarm system, but Nest did have a home security system that
Alarm
was
one
of the, I think it's probably called Alarm, and just one of the things that went by the wayside when Google kind of integrated Nest into Google again. Mm-hmm. That is a brand that they have messed up so bad. So bad. Like, of all of the things that Google do screw up, like, I think they've really not done a great job with the whole Nest thing. Like, Nest should be more of a leader in this space, I think, than they are. And it seems like that they're now trying to get back to that point by integrating it and like basically making Nest the smart home brand for Google in its entirety, right? So like the Google Home is now Nest, right? Like those products have become Nest products, and the Wi-Fi is now Nest Wi-Fi. So like they're definitely doing a better job again. I would like to see Google get a lot better at this, especially with the Nest stuff, and hopefully see them kind of take more of a leadership. Because I don't know, I actually I know people might think this is a silly thing to say, but I actually trust Google with security stuff more than other companies, because this is that argument that people make about Facebook as well, right? Where like Facebook's got my data, they're going to sell my data. Like Facebook and Google are companies that are never going to sell your data because that's what they want. They want it for themselves.
Why sell it when you're already using it?
Exactly. If they sell it, they lose their advantage. Like they want that data, and like there are real questions around a lot of the stuff, as you mentioned earlier. And I think that it is always worth like finding a balance for you of what you're willing to accept. Like most technology products these days is like, what am I willing to give up for what am I willing to gain? And smart home stuff is definitely one of those things. And like I know that like Ring has had their fair share of controversies, but I needed to secure my studio space, right? Yeah. So it's like that's what I was willing to give up to gain, which was an affordable way for me to manage that security on my own. But yeah, I would love to see Google really get more of a foothold again into this, and I do hope that like the kind of integration and then for later proliferation of the Nest brand again might be a bit of a restructuring from them.
I mean, look, you got to keep that Z Flip nice, safe, and secure in the studio, man. Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's top priority.
It's nicely tucked away there. When it comes to entertainment, what have you got going on, like TV and home entertainment system, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so nothing too crazy. So I do have an LG CX series, a 77-inch OLED, which is very, very nice.
77, boy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we got the big one. Yeah. So that's something that we got, I guess it would have been last year. So it's the model that has like G-Sync and 120 hertz, although I don't use any of that because actually I have nothing plugged into the TV. I actually, for the first time ever, use the smart features of the TV built in. I don't have an Apple TV, nothing plugged into it. I use WebOS.
So what is your experience? I know that like one of the great things is like all of the apps are there, right?
Yeah. I think there's like HBO, I think might be one of the only things that's missing from it. But yeah, no, it's great, right? Obviously, most of my time watching TV is spent in YouTube and YouTube TV. And then you've got like Netflix, and it has Apple TV built in now. So it's easy to like AirPlay stuff to it. And that's pretty much all I really need. We do have it connected. So I have an actual custom like home, like a 5.1 setup for the stereo. So I have a Yamaha. It's an RX V385 receiver. It's a 4K 60, HDMI 2.0 receiver to run everything. But yeah, it's not a crazy setup. It's just the TV, it's the receiver, it's the surround sound. I do also have an older OLED, which is actually in the other room. And actually, that's one of the things that I have tested, the new Chromecast. So I don't know if you've tried the most recent Chromecast. I believe that came out last year.
No, I've heard about it.
Yeah. It's no longer like the old school Chromecast, where you just could only cast. It actually has like a remote and it has full Google TV. Honestly, really, really nice, right?
Like it's basically Apple TV or the Fire TV thing now, right? Like that's what they've ended up going for.
I would say it's much closer to an Apple TV, right? Because you have it tries to do the same thing that I feel like Apple was doing but didn't fully commit to, which was it pulls data from all of your streaming services and puts it together, right? I don't have to go into Netflix and into HBO and into YouTube and Twitch and everything. It pulls a lot of the shows I've been watching, a lot of the recommendations onto like a central sort of hub. And obviously you can jump in and it has all the apps and it runs, I'm pretty sure it's running some version of Android, or there's something like that underneath the scenes, because I think it has the Play Store, I believe, is where it pulls apps from. But regardless, I'm actually really impressed with that Chromecast. It does 4K, and the remote's actually really nice. It's like an Apple TV remote, except not bad.
It's got buttons. It's got more buttons.
Yeah. So that's the entertainment setup. What about you?
So for TV, I also have an LG OLED. I have the 48-inch one.
Nice. That's the new one that you got last year, right?
The 48-inch one came out last year because we got one of the 50-somethings. I think it might have been 55. And we ended up needing to return it because it was just too big for our living room.
Oh.
Where we had the server. That was one of the saddest days of my life, Austin.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
The big TV, I unpacked it, sat it down, started watching it. It's like, oh, you know what? This is too much. Like, we're too close for this. So we ended up going with the 48. It was just so sad to go back down to. I had like what we were replacing. It was like a 42-inch Panasonic. It was an LCD, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And going from the 55-inch OLED back down to the 42-inch LCD was just. It was so sad, man. So when LG announced that 48-inch, every couple of weeks I was just checking, like, is it available now? Is it available now? And like as soon as it hit in the UK, I bought it immediately, and I absolutely adore that television. Oh my god, it's so good! It's everything about it is fantastic. We do use the Apple TV as our main kind of television consumption box. If I didn't have the Apple TV already, I would use the smart stuff like you, because I think really these days I don't know why anybody would buy a particular hardware device, because it's all about getting the content, and all of the content is everywhere. So I don't know, like, unless, like you say, you were like a big HBO Max person, you might want to get something for that. But we were as well for a long time using a pair of HomePods as the Apple TV speakers, but this has been incredibly unreliable for me. Like, it's fantastic when it works, but it's been really unreliable. And I've been told of some different troubleshooting things that I should try, which I want to try, but I'm kind of on the fence about this here. Like, I want to see what Apple does next with the Apple TV, because I think they're going to do something at some point, and I'm just intrigued to see what that will be. But other than that, like, we're going to make a change of, like, now that we had a long time where we had these really great speakers, going back to the TV speakers, which are really good on the LG, like legit, like it's the best TV speakers I've ever experienced. It's just not the same. So we've been looking at sound bars, but I haven't found anything that I was super happy with yet. So, I'm just waiting to see here. Like, what I really want to see Apple do is turn the Apple TV into a sound bar, and then maybe I can get everything that I want in one thing.
Interesting, yeah.
But who knows? When it comes to entertainment, that's like the biggest question mark. My PlayStation 5 is plugged into this TV.
Yes. I do not have, again, nothing plugged into my TV. It's literally it. I have an HDMI out to my receiver, the end, and a power cable, I guess.
Where is your PlayStation plugged in? Do you have one at home?
Yeah, it's upstairs on the older OLED. So that's the thing. The older OLED doesn't have 120 hertz and everything. That's fine because I don't really care. So that's where...
I mean, so few games actually do still.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, that TV is mostly... I don't play a ton of games at home, as we maybe have discussed in the past. Most of the gaming that's done on that TV is my wife playing the Switch. So there you go.
Okay. This episode of The Test Drivers is brought to you by SyncUp, a OneDrive podcast. If you're looking for a new podcast to listen to, SyncUp takes you behind the scenes of OneDrive so you can learn about how to connect your files, share your documents, or work from anywhere. And you'll be able to get to hear the design and development side of things too. Every episode covers a dedicated topic with guest interviews featuring news, announcements, and a special topic as well outside of the technology norm. And this is a great mix-up. This is the kind of thing that I like in my podcast. I like a bit of variety. We have variety in this very episode of The Test Drivers, right? Different types of topics that we're talking about. I like to get my kind of horizons broadened a little bit. On every episode of Sync Up, you could expect topics like automation, data security, and remote working. One of the episodes I checked out recently went deep on how you can make Microsoft Teams work within your organization. Considering all of the new challenges that we have facing us in remote working, which I think are going to be here to stay, it's a great discussion on how you can use tools like Teams to keep everyone on the same page while being distributed. So go and check it out right now. Just search for Sync Up wherever you get your podcasts. That's SYNCUP, or just click the link in the show notes. Go check it out right now. Our thanks to Sync Up from Microsoft for their support of this show and Relay FM. What about, all right, when it comes to smart homes, all of this stuff is typically controlled by a smart assistant, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think for a lot of people, notice for us, you choose your smart assistant, and then the products you buy, you want to connect with that assistant. And something that I have been trying to do recently is like try and find stuff that works with both Alexa and Siri, because they're the two products that we have at home. I am more likely to default to the Echo because that has kind of won out at home. Like that is the smart assistant that my wife prefers to use because she finds it more reliable. So my wife is originally grew up in Romania, so she has an accent, and the Echo does far better at recognizing the things that she wants to say that other than Siri, with one notable exception. So every year we set up a Christmas tree, and one of my favorite things about like you can get these little easy things. We just got a little Belkin Wemo smart switch, and it just makes stuff like so easy because then you can turn on and off the Christmas tree lights just by asking for them. But whenever she would ask Echo to turn on the Christmas tree, it would say, "I don't know what you mean by Christmas 3, the number 3."
Oh.
And it didn't matter how she said it; it would never understand it. But then I solved it again with just a smart assistant thing of I just set it to turn on and off at certain times, and if we weren't at home, not to turn on at all. So like little stuff like that. I like being able to do that. They're the benefits that we get from smart assistants. But nevertheless, the Echo is what has won out here. So I would just say like our main smart assistant product is a second generation Echo Show, which is the 10-inch one, and an Echo Dot, which we have in the bedroom. Then that's the second generation one as well. So we have older products there. The new Echo Show is super cool looking. It looks like the old iMac G4. Like it's got like a little base and the screen hangs off it, and it has got a cool feature that you can have it follow you around. Like if you use it for video calling, which we don't do, but if that's the thing that you do, and it will, if you're moving around, the actual screen will turn to face you. I just think that's a super cool feature. Like, why not? But yeah, we've kind of solidified around Amazon here because I think when it comes to smart assistants, Amazon are the leader. They made this a thing, for one, right? Like they made this category as a thing that people would want, and then they're like, because one of the things that we absolutely love. The grocery company that we use, we have a lot of groceries delivered. We were doing this pre-pandemic. We've been doing this for years because we don't have a car. So like a big grocery shop is almost impossible for us to do, enough. Right? And so we've been using a grocery delivery company, and they have an Echo skill. So we can just say hey, add this to the shopping trolley, and it will just add it to our cart with the shopping provider that we use. So fantastic. It's just like nice. Little, like, you're cooking, you realize you're out of this sauce or whatever, and you just ask the Echo to put it in your shopping trolley for you. You don't need to do anything, and everything's done over voice. And it got better with the Echo Show than when we were doing it with the regular one, because on the show, it shows you the product. It's like, is this the one you want? And you say yes. Like, so we're big fans of the Echo family of products. Yeah.
So I have basically taken our smart assistants out of the house. So like I said, we used to use Google Assistant everywhere. We do have a Nest Hub, the second gen, but I'll tell you what, that thing, it is a YouTube machine for the kitchen, essentially, and a nice little wallpaper display. We don't really have anything connected to it.
We use the Echo Show with a gallery of gallery of images, and it just cycles through them. it's like just a really nice little basic thing that it does.
Yeah,
and
I find that these assistants with the screens are really nice to see. When I'm walking by, I'll see calendar and whatnot pop up, but I don't really use it with voice much. It's not something that, it's not, like I said, it's not really connected to much of anything. It's really just a display in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of follows up with the lighting side of things too, where I have not installed any hues whatsoever in the house. I actually like hues. And this is more one of those things that it's probably more so that I just never really got around to changing a million light bulbs. But I didn't find it was massively useful to control them with the voice. And going back to the switches is fine. I feel like I'm going old school, man. I'm in my outhouse. I'm in my I'm lighting my candles at night. The sun goes down and it's bedtime for Austin and family. It's an old school approach. But I can't say, it's been a while since I've had all this stuff like active and running every day. I can't say that I miss it. Like, it was a couple weeks where I'm like, I kind of miss saying, hey, wake word, turn on the lights or turn off the lights or whatever. But I was never, I think the difference is, like, when you're saying, like, you're building these like automations and telling the tree to turn on and off automatically, I was always lazy with this, right?
Yeah.
I never set up anything like that. I was always, even we did have, the whole house full of this stuff, it was always very basic things. Turn on the lights, turn off the lights, turn on this music in this room. Like, it was very, very basic kind of stuff because I never really cared enough to actually go through and do all the custom things. And so now that those basic things are gone and out of the life, I don't miss it, man. I don't miss it that much.
Yeah, we only have a few automations, and I actually prefer to do the automations in Apple's Home app. I find that really reliable. And so we have a couple more of, like, when I get to the studio, we have a couple of lamps with hue bulbs in them, and they turn on when we arrive, turn off when we leave. And with the ones that we have at home, they will turn on at night if we're not home. Right?
Yeah.
And we only have basically like a lamp at home. We have two kind of like standing floor lamps, and they have the Hue color bulbs in them. Because throughout the house, especially in like our main living room, kitchen area, we have those spotlight bulbs. And Hue make those spotlight bulbs, but I totaled it up, and it would have cost like £400 to replace them out. Right. Whoa. This was like 5 years ago as well, so this stuff was more expensive. And I was like, there's just no way I'm doing that. But the lamp that we use, we love it. And I really like the color bulbs. I wouldn't do this if it was just the white bulbs. Mm-hmm. But we actually use the color a lot. So like whether we have like a bright light in, or we have like a warmer light color. And also like Adina has a couple of like color options that she likes to set it to at different times in the day and stuff. So we really get a lot of use out of that. Like, honestly, the Hue bulb in lamps for us is like enough of a reason to have the smart assistant, just so we can just say like, hey, turn on the lights, and it just turn off the lights and it works. Like, we really like that kind of stuff. It's simple, but it's worked for us. And I have a couple of other products that we use that have some smarts to them. We have both one at home and one at the studio. These Dyson, like, it's basically an all-round product. It is a air purifier and a fan and a heater.
Nice.
And it's called Dyson Pure Hot and Cold. Like, that's hot and cool. They're the name of the product. So we use those for all of those things, right? To warm up a room, to cool down a room, and to purify the air. And this particular model that we use has it has an app, but it also has integrations with the Echo as well.
Nice.
So you can turn those on. And then also we have a Roomba.
Of course, you gotta have the Roomba.
Gotta have a
Look,
Roomba.
Man, I had a Roomba for a long time. I really liked it. Eventually, I had a house with stairs, and it couldn't really. I didn't have to put one up.
How many Roombas do you need? Right, you get like four Roombas sometimes.
It was gonna get a little ridiculous.
Yeah,
but my wife actually does have one of the Dyson fans. It's not as cool as yours. It just is. It doesn't have an app. It doesn't have the air purifier, but it does have the fan and it does have the heater, which she uses all the time. But yeah, I've looked at those. The thing with the ones that are the smart enabled devices, that seems like the smarter move, right? Because you can have it automatically run for, I don't know, a couple hours in the middle of the day if you're gone.
Yep.
You can have it automatically kind of track your temperature and whatnot if it's reporting out. That makes a lot of sense to me.
They're expensive, those ones, but I absolutely love it. Like, especially at the studio, because I mean we have heating, but it can't be controlled. Like we have to be there. So like we have quite a big space. It can get cold. So like I can turn that on early in the morning, and then when I get to the studio, it's like I'm not waiting a while for it to really kind of warm up in there. Like I have like a base level, so I really like it for that. So yeah, I like that. I have as well one of the older ones. Like I think one of the previous series ones. I think it's probably the one that your wife has, which is it's a smaller one and it does hot and cool. And I was so sold on that when eventually it came time to upgrade, we went for the big boys.
Yeah, they're really solid, right? I mean, I feel like certainly they're expensive. Certainly you could get something that is cheaper, but they're not super loud. They look nice. They work well. It's one of those things. It's one of the rare products that I feel like is actually worth the added price tag over the competitors.
Yeah, and don't forget, we don't have air conditioning here in the UK. So when we do get super hot in summer, we need fans, right? So that's like another reason as well. Like that thing, it puts out a lot of cool air. It's one of the only products that I've found where it can be, I don't know, whether it's like we're having like 80, 90 degree days, and I can sleep comfortably at night with that because it will cool me down enough that I could still have like a blanket on me or whatever to sleep with. So that's really important when you've got these. Like we're getting these wild summers here in the UK for, I'm sure, no reason at all why the temperatures keep changing in the summer. So it can be very helpful to have these products when you do not have air conditioning.
Man, I live in California. If I don't have air conditioning, I'm not happy. Unless I'm not fortunate enough to live 5 seconds from the beach and have that nice cool air, man. It gets hot. I got to have AC. I got to have heat. I'm a very spoiled person in my ancient wigwam with my candles and my, the Google Assistant is yelling at the clouds.
You like put it in a little soundproof box over there.
Oh, don't get me started, man. Don't get me started. Oh.